being here. Welcome to what I believe is the last session of the 2021 National Workshop on Data Science Education. And fittingly, for the last workshop, we'll be talking about capstone courses and other project-based opportunities for student learning. My name is Arlo. I'm a staff here at the Division of Computing, Data Science and Society, UC Berkeley, working in the Data Science Undergraduate Studies office. And with us today on the panel, we have some brilliant guests. We have Shannon Ellis from the UCSB Data Science Institute at UC San Diego. Ambuj Singh, a professor of computer science from UC Santa Barbara. Pamela Scott Johnson, Dean of the College of Natural Resources at Cal State Los Angeles. And Maliaca Oxnam, Deputy Director for the Data Science Institute at the University of Arizona in Tucson. So quite a panel we have for you today. We're going to spend the first hour or so hearing from our panelists, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers. So please enter any questions you have in the Q&A tab in the session. Like I said, it's the last session, so you all are probably pretty familiar with the platform by now. So if you see in the Q&A tab that there's a question that somebody else asked, press the thumbs up button on there, and we'll make sure to get to those questions. So first, let me just set the stage by saying that I am personally excited for this panel because I manage a program here at Berkeley called Data Science Discovery, where we match teams of undergraduate students who are studying data science with real-world data-centered projects. And so every semester we match about 200 students to 50 projects that come from on-campus faculty researchers, organizations in the social sector, so like nonprofits, NGOs, government agencies, and then we also work with a number of social impact startups. And I've seen how transformational real-world data science projects and experiences can be for students, not only because it's an opportunity for them to level up and gain new skills, but also because it's a chance for students to really feel what it's like to work in data science outside of the classroom, and to help them sort of find their space in this broad, vaguely defined thing called data science. So I'm a big believer in the powerful experience that real-world data science projects can have and capstone projects can have. And I'm excited to hear today more about how other universities facilitate those opportunities and to see what lessons all of us as practitioners and stakeholders can share with each other and bring back to our home institutions. So with that, let's move on to our first presenter. We're going to hear from Shannon first, then Ambuj, Pamela, and Maliaca. So let's get started. Shannon is an assistant teaching professor in the Cognitive Science Department and the UCSB Data Science Institute at UC San Diego, where she focuses on teaching large enrollment, project-based undergraduate courses in programming and data science. Thanks for being here, Shannon.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for that introduction. Hopefully I've got everything shared all right for now. So let me just make sure I can see the questions if they show up. Perfect. Are we all good here? Okay. So as I said, thanks for having me. Thanks for the introduction. And thanks to all of you for coming on a Friday afternoon to chat about one of my favorite topics, which is teaching data science, and particularly teaching project-based data science courses. I'm going to talk about two different classes today. One is going to be a project-based course I teach at UC San Diego, and the other one is our capstone that we run for our data science undergraduates. And so I wanted to start by talking a little bit about a course called Cogs 108, Data Science and Practice. And to set the stage of talking about the project-based aspect, I wanted to give you some context about this course. So this is an upper division, large enrollment undergraduate course. It's offered every quarter. and it's taught with a reasonably small instructional staff. So we have one instructor, that would be me, then 3 to 4 TAs, those would be graduate students, and 3 to 4 IAs, those would be undergraduate students who had previously taken the course. And I'm not going to go through all the topics covered, but you can see here they run the gambit with a single 10-week course teaching all of these things. That means it is a broad course, but not a deep course. And we really focus on application and less so on theory, not because theory is not important. It is very important, and we make that very clear to students. And there are, of course, tons of courses on campus where students get the theory. There's a single prereq, and that is that students have taken some intro-level programming course. Links to all the courses are on, or all the things I'll be talking about are on the slides if you want to see anything else after this, because this will be a very quick intro. Okay, so how does this fit together? There are lectures and labs, as you would expect. Students turn in weekly technical labs. These are graded for concerted effort. So they don't have to get it all right, but they need to make a concerted try. There are also low stakes, meaning not worth many points, weekly concepts quizzes. Those are auto-graded, and then there's 4 to 6 assignments depending on the quarter. And these, after they've done the labs and gotten the answer keys for those, they then do assignments, and those are auto-graded for correctness. What I'm really here to talk about is the quarter-long group project. These are completed in groups of 4 to 5 students, meaning every quarter we manage about 100 different projects. And these projects are topic agnostic, meaning the group gets to decide what question they ask, what data sets they use, and how they're going to approach this. But there are technical and structural guardrails. So the technical guardrails are, these are all done in Python, and students have to turn in a Jupyter notebook at the end of the quarter with all the details of their analysis. And then the structural guardrails are noted here. So students work in these groups all throughout the quarter. They first form their groups in the first few weeks of the course, and the first thing we ask them to do in their groups is an evaluation of a previous Cogs 108 final project. So this is one of the benefits of a large enrollment course. Every quarter, about 40 to 60 groups opt in to having their project shared publicly, which then means I can share a URL with the group and say, hey, go evaluate this one. What do you like? What don't you like about this? What do you want to incorporate with what you're thinking? What do you not want to incorporate? What grade would you have given this project and why? And there's really 2 benefits here. One, this is something that a group can do without feeling the weight of needing to have a project idea right from the get-go, so they can get to know one another. And the second is it starts setting up their expectations of where they're headed for a final project. After those, 2 weeks after that, they submit a project proposal. And in this project proposal, they propose a specific data science question they want to answer. They have to do background research and include a summary of that background research. They have to not find a data set, but they have to propose what the ideal data set would be, meaning there's no like time limitations or money or reality, so that way they know what data they would need in an ideal world. So that when they go find data, they can see that delta between what they actually have and what they wish they had. After that, and the project proposal, we give tons of feedback to, very specific to each group, because this really sets them up for success the rest of the quarter. There's then 2 checkpoints. 2 weeks after they do their data checkpoint. That says, do they have the data they need? And then after that, the EDA checkpoint, exploratory data analysis. Do the data they have, are they actually useful? Can they answer the question they want to answer? Then they have a few weeks after that to pull it all together, do the analysis, answer their set of questions. And this would be a final report. This is the Jupyter notebook that they submit during finals week. So that's during week 11, if we're counting. A final video. This is a very short 3 to 5 minute summary of what they did that has to demonstrate effective oral communication. And each individual submits a team evaluation survey, letting us know how group work went within the group. So to give you just a sense of the types of questions and projects students do, this is one from winter 21 quarter, this past academic year, where a set of students were interested in understanding how COVID-19 has impacted UC San Diego students. Without explaining all the axes and what's going on here, the take home here is that students found that kind of across the board, there were higher grades received, and tracking with that, unsurprisingly, were higher percentage of students saying they recommended their courses relative to when we were in person. Another one that I really liked from this past quarter that was really well explained and well visualized was this group that analyzed the effects of the COVID-19 bubble on NBA playoff game statistics. So if you are not an NBA playoff fan, last season during the pandemic, all the teams went down to Florida to play in what was known as the bubble, which had no crowds, and then kind of got rid of this home team versus away team. And so this group in their analysis found that on the offensive side, there wasn't a big or statistically significant difference between the stats during pre-COVID playoff games and in the bubble. But when they did see differences, they saw that it only was on the effective away teams, showing that home court advantage went away. But they did see differences defensively, that overall in the bubble, defense improved overall. So whirlwind tour through Cogs 108. And I just wanted to reflect on the lessons I've learned after teaching Cogs 108 a whole bunch of times at this point. I think it's 5 times now. Something I didn't talk about is group formation. And my take home here is kind of pick your poison. There's positives and negatives to anything you try or choose. So the first time I taught it, I really wanted to follow, education best practices and form the groups for the students. And I tried to do this in a really thoughtful, which ended up being time-consuming way, where I got information on the students' schedules and the topics they're interested in and their backgrounds of what they're comfortable in when it comes to programming versus experimentation and designing and writing. And I tried to form groups where they had overlapping schedules and overlapping topic interest, but different background in experience. And I spent so much time, an entire weekend, forming these groups, and students hated it, got nothing but negative feedback. Since then, we've tried a few different things. I've largely settled at this point, although I might try some other things, letting them form their own groups. And I would say the projects have been better since then, but I'm studying that in a more rigorous way this summer. So don't hang your hat on that yet. The second one is reminding students early on what, quote, counts. What I have found is that students value code. And that makes sense, right? You can see the code, you can see the outputs from the code. But that leads to a devaluation of all the other aspects that are really important in data science: question formation, research, design and planning, visualization, effective communication. And this leads, my students in this class have wildly different backgrounds. And sometimes those that aren't as strong programmers feel that they don't have value added to their groups. And so I try to remind them that they do. And sometimes those students who are really strong programmers don't think that their group mates hold as much value. So I try to reset that at the beginning. I mentioned this briefly, that feedback, group-specific, detailed feedback early on. When we started giving even more of that, the projects only got better, and later on we had fewer issues getting people on the right track early on. Scaffolding and checkpoints have been critical. Initially, we only had a project proposal, and then students were expected to submit the final report at the end of the quarter. And I had way too many groups, week 10, without data sets, without having really made any progress, and just kind of scrambling, and as a result, not having as strong a projects and not getting as much out of the course as they could. I've surveyed staff, and I know how I feel, and students on this, and they all agree that the checkpoints have been really helpful and beneficial to their learning and to our sanity. Also, I've implemented a single grader for all components. Students know in their group who their grader is, and they can have one-on-one chats with that person. They know that person has read their project throughout the quarter. Again, have gotten feedback, students across the board like this, and staff who have TA'd for me across multiple quarters where we handled it differently have all to a person preferred having been the single grader across a quarter. We, of course, use a rubric, and it's pretty specific, but when there are discrepancies, I will adjust between graders if I see that there is en masse one grader who tends to grade a little more difficulty, so that no student group is penalized because of this policy. And I mentioned having a mechanism to get that feedback at the end of the quarter is mostly effective as a deterrent. Once I implemented this, we have fewer group issues. By and large, students do what they're supposed to do, what they're asked, but sometimes we have freeloaders, and this has helped deter that. Students know from the beginning, if they don't participate approximately equally throughout the quarter, they're at risk of having their grade individually decreased relative to the group. This affects like 1 to 4% of my students each quarter. So that's like max 10 students out of 400. All right. Whirlwind tour through Cogs 108 so that we have stuff we can talk about when we get to the Q&A. I'm going to similarly do that for DSC 180 here. So DSE 180A and 180B are a course sequence. This is the capstone sequence in the data science major within the Haligiolo Data Science Institute. This course has been designed and is run by Aaron Frankel, not myself, but I have been a domain mentor, which I'm going to explain what that means in just a second, for 2 iterations of this sequence. So the way this works is students enroll in DSE 180A, and so they're all in the methodology section, but then they get to pick their domain of inquiry. So the students choose their domain, and I'm going to show you some example domains in just a second, and then they stay in that domain for 2 quarters. These domains are fewer than 20. Usually, I think the average is like 8 or 9 students, so each domain section is quite small. The first quarter, they work to replicate a previous finding in the field. And in the second quarter, they do their own independent projects, their own group projects that they have proposed and implement. When it comes to domain of inquiry, students are not expected to have a background in that domain. They have done almost a little, more than 3 years of data science studies. So they should have a strong technical background. And we're trying to implement the fact that often data scientists enter their field and they learn a ton about that domain or the business acumen they need in that role. And so we don't require them to know about the domain of inquiry. That's what that first quarter is for. So just here's what the capstone project domains were this past year. I'm not going to read them all. I'll give you a second. Hopefully it seems that these kind of run the gambit, which was our goal, that a student would be able to enroll in a section that is interesting to them and aligns with their future goals or their interests overall. Some of these were partnerships with companies, some are faculty at the university, and we're trying to get more even balance. Right now we have more faculty. So the way this looks is the first quarter, each week they have 1 hour of methodology lecture. This is where we talk about project management. Oh, sorry, should have turned those off. And so this is things like Docker and how to manage a data science project, how to work in a team agilely. And so that's what's focused on in the lecture. Domain, we have a weekly meeting and weekly reading assignments. So students read something, they react to it, they think critically about it, and then we discuss it and answer questions in our weekly meetings. And of course, there are office hours for both. This culminates in a replication project of the project we give our students this first quarter. It's 3 reports that culminate in a full final report. And then they also have to propose their project that they're going to implement the next quarter during this first quarter. The second quarter is when they do the thing. They do this project they propose. They still have 1 hour of lecture for methodology. This focuses the second quarter on data science communication. So scientific communication, both written and out loud. And there's a lot for students to learn there. So I'm really glad we're able to fit that in the capstone. And then there's weekly group meetings. So instead of having a paper to read each week and discussing that paper, this is now really like a lab meeting. So students come in, they give updates from the previous week, talk about where they're stuck. Students help one another. Maybe they share some of their results with one another and discuss it. And of course, there's still office hours. Throughout the quarter, they have checkpoints on their code, on their visuals, and on their final report. And at the end of the quarter, they write a really detailed final report. They have some sort of final visual. This is typically a website, and they have a final oral presentation. I'm sure I'm close on time, so I'll go through these pretty quickly. Lessons learned, capstone design, as was mentioned in the intro, right? Like data science is so many different things to so many different people. So designing a course structure that would accommodate all of these has proven difficult. So keeping things much more general so that it works regardless of who's making the project has been important. Students like structure and knowing deadlines, but that's not really how the real world works. So we've been trying to balance where we give enough structure, but leave it up to the students to really plan out when they're going to do each thing. We found that organization is difficult. There are a lot of moving pieces and many faculty members involved. I don't know about you all. Faculty don't always read their emails or respond to them. And so that has proven difficult. I try to respond to all of them to Aaron, but I'm sure he'd say I've missed some along the way. And just by nature of the fact that each domain is unique, grading across domains is really difficult. Best data science practices in one field are not the same in another. And so how do you grade those across them? We've come up with a broad grading scheme so we don't try to get too nitty gritty on the grades. And then motivation and expectations, what students have perceived should be what they do, and then what they do really varies across students. And that's something we're still working out. I'll finish. Teaching how to read scientific journal articles early in the quarter has helped a tremendous amount. Students have really done a better job once I did this, to think critically about the papers and respond as such. Balancing teaching versus mentoring, right? Like I want them to learn on their own in this course, but how do I balance that from like, I know the answer to just say, hey, why don't you look at the answer and then we can chat about it, and make sure you try to find it on your own first. Giving them consistent feedback I have found to be critical. I try to respond at least minimally to every single thing they submit, even if it's something small, and make sure they know when I'm not happy or pleased or think that they should go in a different direction. And then same thing here, consistent grading is difficult. All right, with that, I will stop sharing and realize I couldn't actually see the Q&A when we were doing that. So.
No problem. We'll take all the questions at the end.
Perfect.
So thank you so much, Shannon. I'm so impressed by just the logistics of both those courses that you described, and the thoughtfulness that has gone into to making those classes work, because I know that's it's a lot to keep track of, and a lot to make sure that students are focused on what really matters, and you know, the most useful parts of those projects.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's been really fun.
Okay, great. So our next speaker is Ambuj Singh. Ambuj is a professor of computer science at UC Santa Barbara with part-time appointments in the biomolecular science and engineering program and the technology management program. And through several leadership positions, he's played a really invaluable role in growing the opportunities that UCSB students have to engage in real-world data science projects. So thank you, Ambuj, for being here. And you asked me to share the slides for you. So
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see how it goes. If not, I'll try to do it from here. But let's have you try to share that.
Okay. Give me just 1 second.
Do you want me to try to do it from here?
Yeah, give it a shot if you can. And let's see. Does this look all right for you all? Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Go for it.
So thank you for having me here. I'm here to tell you what we did, but I think more than that, I want to learn from you. I mean, that's my main reason for actually being here. So we have started this the Capstone Projects, and next slide would be good. Thank you. So slide 2, please. Yeah. So this, just as a quick background, this funding has come from NSF as a part of their Harnessing the Data Revolution grant, the HDR grant. And we are working with Cal Poly. I saw a message from Alex on the chat, City College and Cal State San Bernardino. And this program funds fellows at UCSB and at Cal Poly. And as a part of that, we are doing summer internships at UCSB of students that from City College and Cal State. The overall goal is to find a way to build a pipeline from City College and also at Cal State's and to UCSB. So this was like part of this grand challenge in terms of how do we coordinate the development of new courses, which would make things easier. Next slide, please. So as a part of this, we have designed a few of this data science courses. So UCSB, I would say, is a few years behind Berkeley and UCSD in terms of how to build this infrastructure around data science. And just as Berkeley and UCSD, these questions about trying to grow data science is difficult in the UC system, in a public state system, because the structure of what you want to grow does not quite match up with how departments are set up, right? So it is difficult to make that happen. So we have managed to implement, I would say, the two ends of the data science spectrum. So you have the DS1 and 2, so it is like taking the data 8 and adding some components to it. Then a course in Python, which is the ComSci 9, then a course in statistics, and then a PSTAT 100 that builds upon all of that learning. And then there is a big gap in terms of the students' learning. And then we have the capstone course. So we are building our structure in place, and we are trying to work with a data science major that has been proposed to campus. But we didn't want to wait until this measure get approved. So we just wanted to start building out parts of it, and having this funding from the NSF has really helped in that regard. Next slide, please. So the capstone course that we are doing it over here. So we started with a 3-quarter sequence. I taught the fall and winter and spring were taught by faculty in PSTAT. We did not get to 400 students, Shannon. I'm ashamed to put numbers like 55 after seeing your numbers like 400. But I'll tell you, even 55 was very difficult for me. It's not an easy way to scale up. So I don't know how you're managing 400. Hats off to you. So we are trying to inch up to 80 this year. We had a 3-quarter sequence, and you can imagine it was kind of the first course that Shannon talked about was the fall course, in which the students learned about some aspects of machine learning, some aspects of programming, and they did a class project. And then winter and spring, they engaged with a sponsor, which is a company or someone at the university, and they worked on a sponsored project. So it was kind of taking briefly what Shannon mentioned as a first course, and then trying to add that as a back end of the 2-quarter sequence after that. So, and then on the right, what you see is we did a joint capstone with Cal Poly and us, which was done earlier this month, I think June 2nd, around that. And we tried to do a screenshot of everyone. So we had students from Cal Poly, we had students from UCSB, we had a number of different rooms. And Alex from Cal Poly can tell you more about how things happened at his campus. So we tried to have a similar way, try to exchange the fellows. I must tell you that the only year that we have experienced running the capstone has been the lockdown year. So we have no clue as to how things are going to happen the next year, when likely will be in person. So it would have been nice if you had seen at least 1 year of regular lectures, but we have only seen remote teaching as a part of our capstone. Next slide, please. So the challenge that we faced in the capstone was trying to deal with the fact that students that came into this class were from all departments on campus. So they were from close to 15 different departments on campus. And there were some were juniors, there some were seniors. Some had programming and some stats, some had lots of stats and very little programming. So this question about how do we get students ready to do the winter and the spring capstone, where they will be doing both the programming and the stats background. So the goal of my fall course was to get the students ready to do the winter and spring capstone. So it was because I had to make sure that they do the necessary learning in order to get used to the winter and the spring capstones. Was the fall class, that is what I set myself as the main goal, that it has to get the students up to speed to do the winter and the spring capstone. Next slide, please. So you can do the everything all at once. So yeah, so I spent some time trying to teach about machine learning methods, about some aspects of software infrastructure and programming. And I really wanted to get the students into fairness, privacy, and this idea of how do you make sense of the stats. Now, as a textbook, I focused much more on these aspects of the fairness and biases. And there were a set of papers that the student read, and there was some online material. The part that I had the most difficult part teaching, I could teach about fairness and privacy, but I could not teach about ethics. It was a very difficult component to teach as a part of a course in machine learning. So I'm just going to say upfront, I don't think I did a good job in terms of trying to teach about ethics. It's a very difficult, I don't know, that's maybe we need someone from philosophy to actually come and teach about ethics. Next slide, please. So maybe the whole slide, is this the whole slide? Okay. So, and I wanted to get this idea for the students in terms of the project, to get used to the idea that as a part of, so this was in the fall, the students did a small project in class. And I wanted them to get an idea of the fact of the entire life cycle. So they had to monitor the wastewater. Based upon the wastewater, they had to predict the dynamics of disease in different parts of a city. They had data about the socioeconomic status, and they had data about what are the other health factors that are in that community. They had to estimate what is the growth of the disease dynamics given those factors. And they had a certain amount of money, budget, and they had to decide where to spend those dollars to curb the spread of the disease. So I wanted them to get this idea of what is a fair way to allocate, and the fact that as a result of a machine learning model, you have to still reach some decisions. And how do you explain that decision? So I wanted them to think about a project where, besides the machine learning aspect, there is an aspect of the impact on society. How do you allocate money? This aspects of policy. And I wanted them to think about that specific aspect. Next slide, please. And this was what they learned in terms of that. What are the different factors that will be guiding the spread of the disease, and I want them to understand the impact of these factors. Yeah. Thank you. Next slide. So the winter and the spring, now it changed gears. So we had about 55 students. I think there were 3 or 4 students that opted out at that point. And then that group now continued on to do fall, the winter and the spring parts. So we had Alex and Singh, they were the instructors for that. And I and 2 others worked as faculty mentors. Let's keep going. And then we had a set of project company mentors, and we had 2 graduate TAs to help us out in terms of the capstone projects. Next slide, please. So we had a number of different companies and UCSB groups that sponsor these projects. And you have their names on the screen. Next slide, please. Let's keep, yeah, and these are the different projects that the students did. So there were 12 of these projects. They come from different spectrum. It has created for us, I was envious of Shannon when she could take last year's project and give that. So this has created that infrastructure for us that we can possibly be using in my capstone fall class. So I think these are growing pains, and once we have this, maybe trying to scale up will become easier. So that's what I'm hoping. next slide, please. So the winter and the spring curriculum, there was a specific textbook. There were additional readings on data ethics, and there were weekly meetings with the faculty and the company project mentors. And this weekly meetings was the part that was very difficult to scale up. So there were two groups that I was meeting with, and I had to find 2 hours every week. And it was not a class that I was assigned to teach. So it was just finding the cycles to meet with the students was a challenge. So let's keep going. This is my last slide. Lessons learned. So what is it that we learned? Diversity in the student background. It would have been much easier if I knew exactly the students have taken a few setup courses so that I had an idea of exactly what to expect. We are going to do a small boot camp before we did the fall version this year to try to get students. It's an optional boot camp. Just try to give students a chance to come up to the same level. High mentoring load, it's difficult to scale. And at the same time, I find that this was an excellent way for students to learn. So that's my summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambuj. What a exciting time to be creating this new course and looking ahead to this next chapter where we won't be on lockdown. It's going to change things even more. So always exciting to be looking ahead to more change.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So next we have Pamela Scott Johnson. She's the Dean of the College of Natural Resources at California State University, Los Angeles, where among other inspiring initiatives, she has partnered with the city of Los Angeles to promote big data literacy and created a big data capstone program that I know we will be hearing about. So go ahead, Pamela, thanks.
Great. Okay, I have to, can you all hear me? Yes? Okay, great. Okay, let me switch. And are you seeing my first slides?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Looks perfect.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pamela Scott Johnson. I'm the Dean of the College of Natural and Social Sciences. And I've spent the week really learning more about Data 8 and capstone courses and AI, and really thinking about the whole landscape of big data and data science, and kind of converging on how we are more inclusive. So this particular project is a project that we wrote in order to facilitate our students' anxiety about numeric analysis and numeracy while making a difference for their institutions. I was heartened during the course of the week to see my colleagues from San Bernardino, as was just mentioned, and Poly and Fresno and Chico. And here in Los Angeles, our students are very much committed to engaging in the nonprofit organizations, but in really making a difference for the areas that they come from. And so this was really an effort for us to create data literacy. We are in the 3rd year of a $1 million grant from the National Science Foundation. And as was mentioned, we are partnering with the city of Los Angeles and their chief data officers, as well as community partners, which is an administrative hub of nonprofit organizations. This allows us to promote data literacy, analysis, strengthen numeracy in our own institution, facilitate our commitment as an anchor institution to the public good, facilitate community engagement. And, one of our dreams in this project was also to influence public policy. And we'll show you how we were able to do that. We did this work with the City of Los Angeles GeoHub and their open data portals. And this allowed faculty and students to design and implement projects through their goals in their classroom and the goals of the nonprofits. And I'll share with you a little bit about the hub of classes. So I really liked Shannon's kind of layout and scale up of how to do this for, you know, several hundred students, and Ambuj's, interest in really bringing together multiple organizations, and hopefully I can share that with you. So this is these are members of the team. So I have two faculty collaborators, a faculty member who is our project manager, and then we have an individual who is really our nexus point. This individual we hired, he is our community coordinator. He works with the faculty here, keeps all of our records, but he also is seated down at the city of Los Angeles and works with our community partners. And of course, no project is worth its weight unless there's an assessment strategy. And Pamela Leggett-Robinson has been our evaluator. Jean Holmes, who's the deputy mayor and the chief data officer of the city of Los Angeles, has been our partner, along with Ava Pereira, who is also in the city, and then Phyllis Owens, who, and I needed to change her title because she's now the vice president of business and strategic planning, and Ravi Shah, who was also a project manager. So this gives you on the right-hand side, or on my right-hand side, a way in which we conceptualize the university's engagement, nonprofits engagement, and how we kind of work with each other as a team, strengthen our impact individually, and work through this open data source. This open data source was created so that the citizenry of Los Angeles would be able to have a timely way to address the issues that impacted the community. And given who we are at Cal State LA, that's very important to us. But the city also needs to make sure that people know how to use it, know how to access it. And nonprofits are also need to increase their own data capacity. So all that is related to impactful data projects and growth within the community and nonprofits as well. Let's see. So how do we do this? What are some of the things that I think are important to share with you? First of all, because we're in an academic environment, and I appreciated the previous speaker in saying sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to change courses, change the curriculum, certainly as an administrator, where I recognize that the curriculum belongs to the faculty, it's a little more difficult, but we wanted faculty to have new tools, and we want the students to have the tools to make those differences. And so we recruited faculty, and we asked the faculty not to change their entire curriculum, but to embed and to create modifications in their courses so that they would be able to use these open data sets, for which Preston and Don worked with them to ensure that the data sets were pulled down, that they were clean, and that they could be used in the classrooms. We did this for our departmental courses. Some of these courses might have been introductory courses. Some might have been capstone or civic engagement courses. We also did this in our institutional orientation course. I think what the previous speaker said was, you know, when you have students that come in with so many varied backgrounds, it's a challenge for the faculty. So this recruitment and this process and our having faculty fellows in the program made all the difference for putting people on the same page. And then we allowed them to have specific use and data models, and we created curricula tools. And then, so how are the students involved in this? So really, those faculty members stepped up to the plate. We had several statistics classes. We had information systems classes. As I mentioned, we had introductory to sociology classes. So we had a myriad of classes, but many of those faculty members had access to nonprofit organizations, but they really wanted the students to increase their data literacy and analytic capabilities through addressing issues that the students thought were important and for which the faculty had access and engagement. And so the students identified their projects and identified their interest. As part of this process, we had not through and through community partners, we had the nonprofits meet with the faculty, and though they created a kind of a pairing system or triad, because there might have been 3 or 4 nonprofits working with a faculty member, and the students got to work on projects of their interest. We did this through our nonprofit partnership, our partnership with community partners and with the city of city of Los Angeles, excuse me. I was watching too much basketball, but nonetheless, we really made sure that throughout all of this project, one of the lessons learned is that each organization has its own strengths, has its own way of doing business. And the commitment was to complete this project as a community in and of ourselves. And then the final thing is, although the students completed these projects in class, we wanted the students that had an interest and who desired depth in not only their engagement in this process, but also in working with the nonprofit. We wanted them to have an opportunity to be paid during the summer. And so those summer students were called seed scholars. We were planting seeds, not only in terms of the students' interest in data analysis, but also in nonprofits being able to work with them. Excuse me. And so they're called social equity engagement geodata scholars. And so the program was open to any of the students who participated in the course and who work with their faculty member, and they got paid during the summer. They were assigned to the nonprofits, and they continued their role through the coming semester by working with our students in our orientation, so that those students would have an interest to start to think about, well, how do I want to—
Send me a hotspot.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I think Arlo was
Yes, we
unmuted.
can.
Oh, okay. I heard talking, so I wasn't really clear. Okay, so our seed scholars not only had a summer gig, but they came back in the fall and they worked with our freshmen so that they would be able to understand a little bit of the tools and be able to have some one-on-one experience. So how did we do this? We had our community data coordinator, who I already mentioned, provided training for the faculty, supported them embedding the data into their projects and into their classroom. Having that person also provided ongoing access and support to the GeoHub and the other open data portals, and also provided additional support from the city, because this person is really kind of the nexus in city, with the nonprofit organization, administrative hub, and with the institution. And then in addition to those seed scholars that supported the freshmen, we also hired 2 technicians to be able to work with the faculty, because at the end of the day, we also wanted a visualization of the information that everybody had. So what have we been able to accomplish? Well, we had 19 faculty redesign courses and incorporate big data for civic engagement. And that the target was 9 courses, but we had 19. We had 516 students complete 162 research projects with 69 nonprofit organizations. We have had 17 seed scholars complete summer internships, including last year, and we just kicked off our program 2 days ago for our summer program, the 2021 program. And we had 9 sections in our introduction to higher education or our orientation course, and thereby influencing another 225 students. We had participating disciplines from art and sociology and economics, education, criminology, anthropology, and information systems. So what are some of the projects? And this is, I'm pretty sure you'll have access to our PowerPoints, but I also want to share with you some of the projects. The first projects I'm going to share with you is some of the seed internship projects. Then I'll give you a sample of what was created in our orientation course. And then I'll share with you some of the projects created from this past spring's big data courses. So this particular project is, and in fact, Cindy Chen is one of our seed scholars who worked with us last year and who work with a nonprofit organization called City Plants. Now, this project was actually started our first year by one of our undergraduates. And when he worked with City Plants, what they gave him in terms of the goal of working with their data were several Excel spreadsheets. And so this is an organization that is committed to having a greener Los Angeles. They give trees away to the constituents of Los Angeles, but they had never done a visualization or organized their data so that they would know what the tree canopy is. Now, remember, I said that one of our dream goals was to impact policy. Well, when this project began 2 years ago and was continued 3 summers, so the project kept being handed over because City Plants remain one of our nonprofit organizations. The students are able to, this organization was able to go with the city and impact Mayor Garcetti's commitment and equity around the canopies. So that's one of the ways in which, so we accomplished our goal of really impacting the city. This one was really about how COVID-19 impacted the elderly. So when we think about the equity, we think about COVID, we certainly hear about the inequities in access to care and inequities in terms of the care, but we want to make sure that we are able to distinguish the impact on certain constituents. And in this case, the students looked at the impact of COVID on the elderly. And then finally, one of our seed scholars wanted to look at, well, what happens in terms of our environment. One of the latest groups looked at the particulates in the air, and they drew this map of where the most polluted areas are in the city and in the Los Angeles region, and where there were walking paths. And so this particular student looked at an environmental safety analysis and was able to help us understand where there could be a greater opportunity to create walkable streets for the city. This project was actually done by the students in our orientation classes. And I want to remind everybody, we were remote last spring, so that was a kerfuffle, but we managed to get through that kerfuffle. We were also remote in the fall, and so this is one of the projects that was created in the fall as part of that orientation to look at homelessness and to look at how to mitigate homelessness in the area. So this spring, we finished a cohort of 8 faculty members. Here are listed on the left-hand side of your screen, or just the fact that each year we have this public fora where we invite all of our partners, we invite individuals from the institution, where the students showcase their work, and you can find these students' projects and the GIS foils online and in the link. But we had colleagues from our business school, from our geography department, and the nonprofits that they work with, Alliance for Southern California Innovation, South Los Angeles Transit Empowerment, diverse scholars, the El Monte Promise Foundation, the Wildwood Foundation, another organization committed to the beautification and the canopy of Los Angeles, as well as Los Angeles Walk. So this gives you a sense of the students' capstone projects. And again, these projects are embedded in the classroom. They're embedded in the standard process that each of these faculty members create in their classes, and it just embed the big data, and they have the support. This was another set of faculty, so we had so many students at this point that we had to actually have two sessions in terms of sharing. So we had our colleagues from the criminology department, from our religion department that really looked at the LA Commons and some of the historiography of churches in the Los Angeles area, as well as our information system. And you see that these classes are not introductory classes, but are embedded in the special topics and in advanced classes. So this is, of course, I've shared with you lovely pictures of the city of Los Angeles, but I would be remiss if I didn't show you, that we're all trying to get back to the superhighway on our campus. These will take questions later. And thank you for your attention and for your interest in what our students were able to accomplish and the impact that they've had on nonprofits and on their own learning experiences.
Wow, thank you, Pamela. What an inspiring program you put together there. Me personally, I have a public policy background, so I just love seeing students bringing data to decision makers, policy makers. I think there's so much juice there to squeeze. And it really seems like there's been a lot of diplomacy on your part required on getting this program going, not only with the city and getting the projects going, but also bringing faculty in to adapt their courses as needed and to bring them into these fora that you mentioned. So really impressive. Okay. Maliaca, she is a deputy director for the Data Science Institute at the University of Arizona in Tucson. She's focused on broadening data science capacity across the university. The Data Science Institute assists with research projects as well as provides data science training and support to researchers, instructors, and their students. And we're looking forward to hearing about that right now. So go ahead, Maliaca.
Okay, so first let me make sure that I've got the screen sharing properly. Are you able to see
Looks
my
great.
Screen? Okay, perfect, thank you. So thank you, and I very much appreciate everybody who has stuck around for this last session as it's getting later in the day for folks. I'm going to talk about something that's not a traditional capstone project, but is project-based learning. The Data Science Institute at the University of Arizona is not an academic program. We are actually out of our research office, and as such, we try to support the data science programs that are forming on our campus, but our real goal is to embody and help and support the research mission of our institution. So let me move forward. Just a quick summary to give you a sense of data science at the University of Arizona. Currently, it's a very distributed system. We do not have an undergraduate program. We do not have any one particular graduate program. It is very distributed between different departments. Departments share courses, departments have folks that move between a lot of different things. We are in the formation of a data science academy, which will be the academic side of the house for data science and is working on trying to wrangle all the programs as they have formed in the last several years. And I sit in the Data Science Institute, which, as I mentioned, is actually more on the research side of things, where we're looking at different research teams and providing that training and support. So just Institute, because it's a little different than most of the presenters that have been here over the last week. We really focus on working across domains, working across teams of researchers to build the research outputs that we can attain. We work on developing data science teams. We work on fostering those collaborations. We do a lot of reaching across the aisle with different groups of scientists and researchers to say, hey, you guys should really be talking. You guys are doing very similar research, or your expertise and your research would really benefit one another. Let's work together on something. Our staff supports many different types of data science projects, particularly as funding is secured. They often get hired out to actually do different elements of support on projects in collaboration with those teams that we help to form. We're focused on retaining, but also in building data science expertise around campus, both in terms of faculty who are coming in, students who are being recruited. And we want to retain those students who are absolutely exceptional and would continue to benefit our research process. So we have training, we're solving challenges. The Data Science Institute, again, just to give more context, offers several different student researcher programs. We have a Data Science Ambassador program, which is at the PhD level, where colleges actually nominate a student that they would like to have be the first point of triage with data science type questions. We do a lot of training with them. We help with consultations. The students do a lot of workshops that are very much college specific and applicable within the needs of a particular college on campus. We also have a Data Science Fellows program, which is a postdoctoral program, very much focused on health and life sciences, again, building a community of support and outreach. And then the program I'm going to talk about today is the newest program, which is the Roots for Resilience Research Assistantship. And before, let me continue before I go into a lot of details on that program. For context, it's also important to know that we collaborate very heavily with Cyvers. If you are not aware of Cyvers, I strongly recommend going and exploring, learning more about it. It's an open science workspace for collaborative computation and sharing of analyses. It is free. It is an NSF-funded project. It started as the iPlant initiative, so it comes out of the life and plant sciences. It is very much life science based, but it is quickly expanding to all areas of research. So we do a lot of work with the Cyvers group. They physically sit next to us on campus, and so our staff interacts with them quite a bit. And we try not to replicate tools or resources that we know that they've already developed and made available openly. So one of those tools is this foundational open science skills workshop that they offer. It used to be offered as a week-long intensive course, and that has actually been spread across the duration of a couple of different months. So it roughly matches our semesters here at the University of Arizona. And we use this as a foundational piece in this project-based learning. So the Roots for Resilience Research Assistantship, it's co-led between the Data Science Institute, Cyvers, and then another strategic institute on our campus called the Arizona Institute for Resilience. We came together, both data science and the Arizona Institute for Resilience have strategic efforts and initiatives for our campus. They are very much highlighted. So we came together and said, hey, how can we help bring together the data science component with resilience? And what we established is something that is actually offered right now. It's at the introductory graduate level, but could very much be applied at a high level undergraduate or a capstone type level. The objectives are basically to train the students. So these students are coming in or are already working in an area where they are using data science or big data science, or are expected to be using big data science in their area of research. So we are training them in the use of the applied open science and also in the computational infrastructures. We're moving them out of their course-based experiences into that real-world experience. We're also trying to increase the department's data science capacities, as I described earlier. The focus is heavily on the applying and experimenting with the tools to support both their personal research in the case of a student who may have a dissertation that they're working on or some other form of independent study, but also and or alternatively within a research lab that they are working or within the department more broadly. One of the objectives from the get-go has been the interdisciplinary research partnerships, and then also having these students become more of an ambassador within their departments and within their faculty and within the other students of that program. So a quick overview of how this is structured. So we are not nearly at the scale that Shannon was describing or some of the other programs described earlier. We have consciously decided to keep this capped at no more than 15 students. The students are selected we asked the Arizona Institute for Resilience to select and solicit 2 departments and programs that are most closely affiliated or most applicable to resilience-based research. From there, the departments then select or nominate a particular student that they would like to have participate, and they request with the Institute for Resilience the ability to participate in this program. We do hold 2 to 3 spots specifically for students coming from computer science or engineering or math and statistics, so those core foundational areas of data science, specifically because we want to encourage and recognize the need to build collaborative partnerships and teams when working in data science. And we want the students across all these different areas to learn to talk to each other and work with each other more than they do in the classroom settings, at least here. The students, as I mentioned earlier, are going to participate in that Cyverse FOSS workshop. So it roughly meets 1 time per week. There are additional kind of traditional classroom-based assignments that go along with that, where the students have to do group work. They have to apply to projects that are given as part of the workshop itself. The cohort, the 12 to 15 students, meet bi-weekly, so every other week we're meeting with them to reinforce both what they're learning in Cyverse and then also to talk about their applications in their real-world project-based learning. So what we've found is rather than focusing on the data science, so to speak, and the intricacies of the data science, and sometimes that definitely comes up, we're spending a lot of time actually talking about the difficulties or the challenges that students face in the communication. And what happens when they're not a project or a lab is not using the tools that they've been taught in their coursework. What happens if the project is moving in a direction and they need to interrupt something and talk about those analyses or talk about the process being used. We do a lot of coaching to the students around these different things. The conclusion of the program is focused around a presentation that is given to the home department faculty in consultation with the advising or the mentoring professor who nominated the student to begin with. That professor is working with them on the data science components and on the science components, because we are bringing in students across the university in a wide range of applications, and we need that professor's expertise to make sure that they're overseeing the content and the work that's being done. And then, of course, we bring in a lot of social engagements in order to build community and to bring these students into a much broader data science community and make them feel comfortable in what is sometimes to some of these students a very strange world, talking about coding and talking about math and stats, where they may be coming from law, or they may be coming from architecture or built environment areas that really do not engage in these same areas the way we do in data science. So just to give a sample topics of a lot of the different concepts and the tools and other skills that come about as part of this project-based learning. We spend, and we spend a lot of time on this whole concept of open and reproducibility. So we talk about open science, we talk about open access, we talk about open source, we talk about what does it mean to have reproducible research. And it's a fascinating conversation because these are very bright students who have not had the time to sit back and reflect on some of this. They may have heard about it, they may have thought about it a little bit here or there, but they don't realize that they're now in the middle of needing to use these different tools, processes, and think in these different ways. And we encourage them to have very open conversations with their labs, their advisors, around what does it mean to be open and reproducible and how to structure their work in these different ways. We talk about the FAIR principles, CARE principles. I won't go into everything. Obviously, project documentation, data pipelines, the use of metadata in these open environments and how to make their work findable and discoverable is important. Data repositories. There are a lot of different tools that get discussed because, again, we don't know who's coming in. We don't necessarily know how their labs are already working. We don't know what they may be choosing to use or have used in the past that they may want to contribute. So it's a very fluid discussion around tools, what they can use, what are the pros and cons. And a lot of times they get brought into leading their own conversations in these areas. And then, of course, across all of this, we're talking about the communication and the presenting skills, how to build community, how to work in collaborative teams, intellectual property. There are just countless areas that the students are learning about as part of this process. So application, as all of you know from Capstone's, application can be quite challenging. We hear a little bit of everything over the course of the semester. You know, we start with but my lab doesn't work that way, or my professor doesn't know these tools and is hesitant to use them. And we coach them through how to have those conversations and how to introduce, why is it important that they're posting their code on GitHub? How can they structure that for multiple students in the laboratory to be working that way? How can they think about a more collaborative teamwork? So we coach them through all those conversations, both as part of the project meetings, the cohort meetings, and also one-on-one. I'm always surprised at the students who say, oh yeah, I know these tools, but they've only used it in one particular way. And they're always surprised to hear, oh, you mean I could do that with this tool? Oh, you mean this tool could actually do this too? And they're constantly sharing. It's one of the fun parts of the class for me. Reproducibility, we've talked about. The change of terminology and but everybody does science this way, right? It is shocking to students to learn that not all disciplines are equal. Not all disciplines handle the scientific process in the same way. Not all of them have the same processes that they go through, and to learn the differences in terminology and figure out how to talk with one another. We heavily emphasize this. We try to create situations and conversations that bring out these elements so the students have to struggle through them and become more comfortable in those elements. And just to wrap up, just a few student comments to show how much they appreciated it. I love the first student comment that talks about, you know, really this is her first truly hands-on learning experience for data science. So this student came in with an incredible background. Was an international student who came over and just blossomed with the empowerment of being able to take these conversations back into her lab, setting up her dissertation work the right way, was very empowering. And it wasn't necessarily about the technical aspects of data science. It was about just how do I do this the proper way element of data science. And the other comments are very similar. And with that, I will conclude so that we can move into the group conversation.
Great, thank you so much, Maliaca, and what a wonderful program you've got there. And thank you for really highlighting some of the difficulties that come with taking on students and projects that you know, implement data science in different ways and are coming from different backgrounds, and wrangling all those different people and skill sets into something coherent and into a successful project is really difficult. So thank you for your thoughts on how to do that. Okay, so we do have some time for Q&A here. One last chance for all of you in the audience to include your questions in the Q&A tab and upvote the questions that you're interested in. We have one here at the top that we'll start off with, and it's directed towards you, Shannon, but I think it's relevant for the rest of the panel. And I'll frame it in a specific way here. The question is asking, Shannon, what do you look for when evaluating project proposal? And in your case, they're coming from students, but it sounds like for the rest of the programs that we heard from today, the project proposals are actually coming from external partners for the most part. So, you know, I think that's a really difficult question for all of us that work in applied data science projects. How do we know when a good project or when a project is going to be successful, and how do we help, you know, reframe that question so that the students can be successful? So we'll start with you, Shannon, and then maybe we'll go around the group and hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll try to be somewhat brief because there's a long answer to this, but I'll try to give the short answer. I try to encourage students to propose data science questions that are clear, specific, and answerable with data. And I give examples of this in class, but the answerable with data, like that's almost anything. So that one we don't need to like focus on too much, but it's the clear and specific. And I walk students through examples of like the question you might have when you're walking down the street, like how does pop culture affect politics, right? Like that's not specific enough to be a data science question. So I start with that and I walk them down to how do you get to something that's specific and measurable. And when students go through that process, and get to that specific question that makes it clear to me they have thought about what it is they would actually measure to answer this question, that's a sign of a really good question and a start to a good proposal. I'm going to half answer another question that popped up in the Q&A because I think it goes along with this, which was like, what if students find a data set and then form a question around that? Well, sometimes that can be successful, especially if it's within a company and there is already a like large goal and you're forming a specific question within that large goal. That's one thing. But often students are like, I don't know what question we should do. So I'm just going to go on Kaggle and find this first data set and then form a question around that. And that is great for getting practice, but not for necessarily formulating interesting questions. And so I try to deter students from doing that. Like start with something you're actually interested in. You're going to want to do the project more if you actually care and wasn't just the first thing you could find on Kaggle. And there's nothing wrong with Kaggle. And for those not familiar, it's an online platform that's really great for lots of things, but it's not great for necessarily students formulating a really thoughtful, specific question. And I try to deter students. I'm like, if it's on Kaggle, thousands of other people have done this. It's not going to make you stand out when you go on the job market. So I didn't actually make that short. I'll stop there.
No, that's great. And I think you're right. As more and more data becomes publicly available, starting from, you know, what is an interesting question, and more feasible because the data to potentially answer that question is more likely to be out there. Ambuj, I know you work with a number of corporate partners, and that is one of the other questions in the Q&A as well. So we'll wrap that in here. But how has that experience been getting those projects put together from those external partners and turning them into something workable for your students? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
One of the principal tasks that you have, make the sponsor understands what can be achieved. And the students go after something that they can achieve in 20 weeks. I think at times a student will end up asking a question that is more like a PhD thesis, or a sponsor may be asking something which is like someone who has been hired to work for 1 year. So I think just trying to make sure that you balance it out on both ends. And I think that is critical because you do sponsor to be engaged for a number of years in a row. So you don't want a sponsor to be saying, yes, this is do it, and the team does not quite do it, and the sponsor then is not happy with. So how do you get to manage that middle ground on both the sides, the students and as well as the sponsors? And really in terms of achieved.
Yeah, managing expectations is so key, especially when working with external partners that haven't necessarily had a lot of experience working with students. You know, I always tell our project partners that working with students is its own beast, and that they need to be prepared and understand that, you know, students are really good at overestimating their availability and capacity in the upcoming semester, and that they have their schedules fluctuate, right? And that they might need to take a step back for midterms. So communicating all of that up front goes a long way in avoiding disappointment. Pamela, I know you worked with the folks at City of Los Angeles from the Chief Data Officer's office, and I imagine that they are very accustomed to designing these sorts of projects, you know, with or without students. Did it take a lot of work to get, you know, their ideas into something workable for the students in your program, or was that a negotiation as well?
Yeah, I think it's really a negotiation, and I appreciate you saying that different organizations and entities have a different concept of what students do, and the students' expectations about what they can accomplish. And really, what happens is our community practicum coordinator, the City of Los Angeles, they have really pulled all of the data from all of their different offices, from transportation, from sanitation, from, you know, law enforcement, into a platform so that people can have access. But people don't know what data is. They don't know how to access it. Certainly that's true for nonprofit organizations, but our students in our social sciences and in our, you know, mathematics and many of our courses are trained to be analysts and have to work with data. And I did appreciate what you said, Maliaca, that it happens from different lenses, right? So a sociologist's lens and a psychologist's lens is different than a mathematician's lens. And so that team of our GIS technicians, as well as our coordinator, work with the city on the types of data sets to be able to clean. They then work with the faculty for the faculty to be able to translate how they're going to be teaching the students. Because that's why it's important to pull down those data sets and give it to the faculty as it is embedded in the classrooms. So that way you don't have a mistranslation of what is being used, what processes are being taught within that classroom, so that the student can use that as part of their disciplinary training and their skill set development. So it's a dance. As one of my faculty members like to say, it's kind of a dance. When you first start dancing, you're stepping on each other's toes, and then once you hurt enough, you decide there's a commitment to trying to coordinate activities one with each other so nobody gets hurt.
Definitely don't want anybody getting hurt. But I love that, the data science dance. It sounds fun. And I appreciate that insight about, you know, different perspectives coming together and providing additional context. So I think especially with city data, there's so much important context around where that data is coming from, how it's generated, and when you're talking about policy decisions being made from analyses of that data, that can have real implications. So it's important that students who are maybe coming from a technical background are able to be somewhat fluent in examining some of those other questions around the data.
It's also critical for the nonprofit to be able to, and the student and the faculty to listen to what the nonprofit's goal is in the data that they already have. So there's the city data, but sometimes the nonprofit will have a set of data that they say, we want to do this and this and this. And so it does take a lot of listening. This is the human interaction that's part of being a client and listening from a client's perspective on what is anticipated. And there are multiple clients in those conversations.
Yes, and that's so difficult to do. Maliaca, you talked a bit about that as well, in terms of helping the students and the project teams communicate back and forth with the project sponsor. And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how you approach that, and how that goes into forming the projects that ultimately come out.
Yeah, so I think Shannon talked about kind of touch points throughout the course, because it's sort of like you give students a paper and you give them a topic, and then you say your paper's due next week, and then you see, nobody comes to class that week because they're in the computer or their library. So we have
Right.
touch points. So the GIS technicians are on call, because somebody's also asking, how do we pay for this? What kind of resources? The faculty get just enough money to say, I'm willing to try this out. But the technicians, the community partner, the community practicum data person as well, they really are working with each other. It's a constant conversation. So there is a common syllabus that this module is embedded. There's tracking, how many hours, who's going to the lab. The project actually has videos, little vignettes that are part of our archives that says, what is data? How do you do this? So that we don't have to reinvent. So the students are also required to go in and watch those videos on the how-tos and what to pull down, so that when they come to class or they're in consultation with their nonprofits, we also make those little videos available for the nonprofits as well. I think Eric is getting ready to kick us off. I'm gonna close so that you can ask someone else a question, and I'll be here in case there are other.
Okay, yeah, I see Eric coming here to wrap up as well, but I would like to hear from you, Maliaca, on your thoughts about communicating between the data scientists on the project and the clients who might be coming from a different field.
Sure. So as many of the other panelists already discussed, we use touch points. Our cohort meetings are the touch points where the students are very directly expected, and they know that we are going to ask them about the application of the concepts that they have applied from the workshop in the last 2 weeks, as well as what they are currently applying and doing in their research and or laboratory experiences. We are also in touch with the different faculty, so that at different points in the semester, we're checking in with the faculty to see how those conversations are going, and if there are any rough patches or things we should be aware of. And then, of course, at the end, in the students, there's a bit of pressure when the student knows that they have to present to the faculty of their department at a department meeting at the end of the semester. And that gets scheduled up front. We have them set those dates very early so that they are very aware of when they need to present. And we do checkpoints on that to make sure that we go over how they're going to present, what they're planning to present, as well as having them work with their advising faculty member as well, because sometimes there are particular ways in which they want to have data presented, whether that is strategy, whether that is research accomplishment, whether those are tool sets that others in the department should use. There are different strategies that those faculty may be trying to support in building that data science capacity.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of best practices there in that answer. So thank you for that. And there's just so much more here that we have in the Q&A chat, and that I really want to dig into. I think we're gonna have to organize our own capstone course and project-based learning workshop and conference. So we'll get to work on that right away. But let me just wrap up by saying thank you all for your insights, for your experience. I'm certainly inspired, and I know that everybody in the audience is as well. Eric, do you have any final words for us?
Yeah, just a huge thank you. I really like this panel. I really like, everybody leaning in. I think there's a whole thing where we're teaching students so many skills, like reproducibility is a skill, like workflows, working with people, influencing public policy, data communication, they're all skills, and they're all part of like data science is a new citizenship, data science is for engaged participation in your society. I love it. I love it. But this is the last panel of the week. And so I do need to say thank you so much for these awesome panelists coming and sharing their time. So many awesome people have come. so many great participants, so many folks leaning in and keeping the chat going. You know, it's really moving for us to put on this free workshop because we're in the project of like disseminating information and helping people build their programs and helping people spread the word. But when so many people put so many of their own time into it, it's really meaningful. I will have to say a thank you to Ksenia, who helped facilitate and did a lot behind the scenes. Thank you to Anthony, who helped facilitate and do a ton behind the scenes. Justin has helped out from Hong Kong. Thank you to a whole bunch of student teams. I really feel like we're part of like a growing thing here. It's an exciting time. Each year I feel like we're this new thing's happening, but it's still growing. We're still on this upward arc and upward curve. So I don't know what it's gonna be like next year. We would love to keep so many of these great conversations going. I appreciate all the different schools and all the different parts of the country, people from other countries calling in. It's really heartwarming, and it really makes you feel like you're engaged in a project. So thanks so much, everybody.
You, Eric. I know you worked really hard putting on this incredible workshop. So job well done.
All the video, all the content's going to be up on the webpage. The videos are already going up. Send us your slide decks if you haven't. And we will also be sending out a feedback form. So as you're all teachers, you know that we need like a little bit of feedback to make us validating us. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.